She had nothing. No home, no money, no family. But when a 4-year-old girl wandered into the storm alone, Emma didn't hesitate. She carried that child through the rain for 3 miles. She didn't know the girl's father was a millionaire. She didn't know he'd been searching for hours. And she certainly didn't know that one act of kindness would change both their lives forever. The rain came down like punishment from the sky, sheets of water that turned the streets of Chicago into rivers. Emma Sinclair pressed herself deeper into the doorway of the abandoned bookstore, pulling her thin jacket tighter around her shoulders. It wasn't much shelter, but it was better than nothing. Nothing. That word had become the theme of her life. 6 months ago, she'd had everything. A small apartment, part-time job, a nursing degree nearly completed, a mother who called her every Sunday to ask about her classes and remind her to eat enough vegetables. Then the diagnosis came. Stage 4. Inoperable. Emma had dropped out of school without a second thought, moved back home to care for her mother through those final, brutal months. She'd burned through her savings on medical bills the insurance wouldn't cover, on prescriptions that cost more than rent, on the funeral of the only family she had left. The apartment was gone within weeks of her mother's death. The eviction notice had arrived on the same day as the final hospital bill. $14,000 she didn't have and would never be able to pay. So here she was, 24 years old, sleeping in doorways and eating at soup kitchens, trying to figure out how her life had fallen apart so completely. The storm intensified, thunder rolling across the city like the world was angry. Emma closed her eyes and tried to remember what warmth felt like, what safety felt like, what hope felt like. That's when she heard it. A sound that cut through the rain and the thunder and the howling wind. A sound that made her blood run cold. A child crying. Emma's eyes snapped open. She peered into the darkness, into the curtain of rain, searching for the source. There, on the corner, a tiny figure in a pink raincoat, stumbling along the flooded sidewalk, sobbing. A little girl, alone, in the middle of a storm. Emma didn't think. She just moved. She sprinted out of her shelter, the rain immediately soaking through her jacket, plastering her hair to her face. She reached the child in seconds, dropping to her knees on the wet concrete. Hey, sweetheart. Emma kept her voice gentle despite her pounding heart. Are you okay? Where are your parents? The little girl looked up at her with huge, terrified eyes. Dark curly hair was plastered to her face, and she was clutching a soaked stuffed bunny to her chest. She couldn't have been more than 4 years old. I can't find my daddy, the girl wailed. I woke up and he wasn't there and I looked and now I'm lost and Mr. Whiskers is scared. Emma's heart shattered into 1,000 pieces. Okay. It's going to be all right. She pulled off her jacket, the only thing protecting her from the cold, and wrapped it around the shivering child. What's your name, sweetheart? Sophie. That's a beautiful name. I'm Emma. And I promise you, Sophie, I'm going to help you find your daddy. But first, we need to get you somewhere safe and warm. Okay? Sophie nodded, tears mixing with rain on her cheeks. Without hesitation, Emma scooped the little girl up into her arms. Sophie was light, too light, and she immediately buried her face in Emma's neck, her small body shaking with cold and fear. Hold on tight to me and Mr. Whiskers, Emma said. We're going on an adventure. The nearest shelter was 3 miles away. 3 miles through a storm that showed no signs of letting up. Emma had walked it many times, knew the route by heart. But never like this. Never carrying a child. Never with the rain turning every step into a battle. She walked anyway. 1 block. 2. 5. Her arms began to ache, but she didn't put Sophie down. Her feet squelched in her worn sneakers, water seeping through holes she tried to patch with cardboard. She couldn't feel her fingers anymore. Didn't matter. She kept walking. Emma? Sophie's voice was small against her shoulder. Yeah, sweetheart. Are you an angel? Emma laughed despite everything. Despite the cold and the pain and the absurdity of her situation. No, baby. I'm just someone who's going to make sure you're okay. Sophie was quiet for a moment. Then, Mommy's an angel now. Daddy said she watches me from heaven. Maybe she sent you. Emma's throat tightened. She held Sophie a little closer. Maybe she did, sweetheart. Maybe she did. By the time Emma reached the shelter, she could barely stand. Her body was numb, her vision blurring, her lungs burning with each breath. But Sophie was still in her arms. Safe. Alive. Rosa met her at the door, her eyes going wide with shock. Emma! Dios mío, what happened? Who is this? Her name is Sophie, Emma managed through chattering teeth. She was lost in the storm. She can't find her father. Rosa immediately ushered them inside, wrapping blankets around both of them, shouting for hot soup and dry clothes. Other shelter workers gathered, someone calling the police to report a found child. Emma sat in the corner, wrapped in a scratchy blanket, watching as Sophie was dried off and fed and fussed over. The little girl kept looking back at her, kept reaching for her. Wouldn't let anyone take Mr. Whiskers to be dried unless Emma promised he'd come back. You saved her life, Rosa said quietly, sitting beside Emma. In this weather, a child that young. She wouldn't have lasted much longer. I just did what anyone would do. No. Rosa's voice was firm. You did what a good person would do. There's a difference. Emma didn't feel like a good person. She felt exhausted and frozen and scared. But when Sophie broke away from the shelter workers and crawled into her lap, clutching that soggy bunny, Emma felt something else too. Purpose. For the first time in months, she felt like she mattered. The door to the shelter burst open an hour later. A man stood in the entrance, soaking wet, wild-eyed, desperate. He was tall and broad-shouldered, his expensive coat drenched, his dark hair plastered to his forehead. He looked like he hadn't slept in days. Sophie! His voice cracked. Sophie! The little girl's head snapped up from Emma's shoulder. Daddy! She scrambled out of Emma's lap and ran across the room, launching herself into the man's arms. He caught her like she was the most precious thing in the world, sinking to his knees, holding her so tight Emma thought he might never let go. Baby girl! He was saying, over and over, tears streaming down his face. My baby girl. I thought I lost you. I thought. His voice broke. He couldn't finish. Emma saved me, Sophie said, pulling back to look at her father's face. She carried me through the rain and kept me warm, and she says Mr. Whiskers is very brave. The man looked up. His eyes, steel blue and red-rimmed, found Emma across the room. And something in his gaze made her forget how to breathe. Nathan Cross hadn't known fear until tonight. He'd built a hotel empire from nothing, faced down hostile takeovers and economic crashes and competitors who wanted to destroy him. None of it had scared him. Not really. Not the way the last 4 hours had scared him. He'd put Sophie to bed at 8 o'clock, like always. Read her a story, kissed her forehead, checked the nightlight twice because she was afraid of the dark now, ever since her mother died. Then he'd gone to his home office to review contracts, keeping the baby monitor on his desk like he always did. The nanny had called in sick. The backup nanny was on vacation. Nathan had insisted he could handle one night alone with his daughter. He was her father, for God's sake. How hard could it be? He'd been so absorbed in work that he hadn't noticed the silence. Hadn't noticed that the soft sounds of Sophie sleeping had stopped. It wasn't until he glanced at the monitor and saw an empty bed that the world ended. He'd torn through the penthouse like a madman, checked every room, every closet, every possible hiding spot. The front door was unlocked. Sophie knew how to work the elevator. She'd mentioned wanting to find her mother, wanting to look for her in heaven, and Nathan had thought it was just the innocent ramblings of a grieving 4-year-old. He'd been so stupid, so careless, so focused on his work that he'd let his daughter slip away into a storm. The police had been sympathetic but realistic. A small child in this weather, wandering alone through Chicago. The statistics weren't good. Nathan had ignored them, had walked every street in a 5-mile radius, screaming Sophie's name until his voice gave out. When the call came from the shelter, he'd driven 90 miles an hour through flooded streets to get there. And now his daughter was in his arms, safe, alive, because of a woman he'd never met. Nathan looked at her across the room. She was young, maybe mid-20s, with auburn hair that was drying in messy waves around a face that was too thin, too pale. Her clothes were worn, her shoes had holes, and she was shivering despite the blanket wrapped around her shoulders. She was clearly homeless, and she had saved his daughter's life. "Sophie, sweetheart, stay with Rosa for just a moment, okay?" Nathan kissed his daughter's forehead and stood, walking toward Emma. She watched him approach with wary eyes. Blue eyes, he noticed, the color of summer sky. "I don't know how to thank you," Nathan said, his voice rough. "What you did tonight, carrying her through that storm." She was scared and alone. Emma's voice was quiet but steady. "Anyone would have helped." "No." Nathan shook his head. "No, they wouldn't. I've seen people walk past suffering every day without looking twice. You didn't walk past. You gave her your jacket. You carried her for miles." He took a shaky breath. "You saved my daughter. I owe you everything." Emma looked uncomfortable with the intensity of his gratitude. "I'm just glad she's okay. Please." Nathan reached for his wallet. "Let me give you something. Money, a hotel room, whatever you need. I own hotels. I can set you up somewhere warm and safe for as long as you need." He saw something flash in her eyes. Pride. And then walls going up. "I don't want your money. But I didn't help Sophie for a reward." Emma stood, the blanket falling from her shoulders. "I helped her because she needed help. Because that's what decent human beings do." She started to walk away, then paused. "Take care of her. She's special." She was halfway to the door when Sophie's voice rang out. "Emma! Emma, wait!" The little girl broke away from Rosa and ran to Emma, grabbing her hand. "You can't leave. You're supposed to come home with us. Mommy sent you to take care of me, remember?" Emma crouched down, and Nathan watched something soften in her face, a gentleness that made his chest ache. "Sweetheart, I'm not. Please." Sophie's lower lip trembled. "Please, Emma. I'm still scared. Mr. Whiskers is still scared. We need you." Nathan saw Emma's resolve cracking. He saw the war in her eyes between pride and something else. Something that looked like longing. He made a decision. "Sophie's right," he said, stepping forward. "Come home with us. Just for tonight. Just until the storm passes and you can get warm and dry properly." He held up his hands when she started to protest. "No charity. No strings. Just one human being helping another. You did it for my daughter. Let me do it for you." Emma looked at Sophie's pleading face, at Nathan's sincere one, at the rain still pounding against the shelter windows. "One night," she said finally. Sophie squealed with delight and threw her arms around Emma's legs. Nathan felt something loosen in his chest, something that had been tight for a very long time. The drive to his penthouse was quiet. Sophie fell asleep in her car seat within minutes, exhausted from her ordeal, still clutching Mr. Whiskers and Emma's hand. Emma stared out the window at the passing city, her reflection pale and ghostly in the glass. "You're Nathan Cross," she said suddenly. "I just realized. Cross Hotels. I stayed in one once when I was a kid. My mom saved up for months to take me to New York for my birthday. Good memory or bad?" "Good. Really good." A small smile crossed her face. She ordered room service for the first time in her life. "We ate chocolate cake in bed and watched movies until midnight." She said it was the fanciest she'd ever felt. "Where's your mother now?" The smile faded. "She passed 6 months ago." "I'm sorry." Nathan's hands tightened on the steering wheel. "My wife passed 18 months ago. Sophie's mother. Car accident." Emma turned to look at him. In the dim light, her eyes seemed even bluer. "I'm sorry too." They didn't speak again until they reached the building. But something had shifted between them. An understanding. Two people who knew what it meant to lose everything. The penthouse was everything Emma expected and nothing she was prepared for. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. Furniture that probably cost more than her mother's entire medical debt. Art on the walls that belonged in museums. And toys. Scattered across the pristine floor. Toys everywhere. A pink bicycle in the corner. Crayon drawings taped to the refrigerator. Tiny shoes kicked off by the door. Nathan saw her looking. Sorry for the mess. Since Caroline died, it's been hard to keep things together. I had a live-in nanny, but she quit last month. Said Sophie was too difficult. His jaw tightened. My daughter isn't difficult. She's grieving. She seems wonderful to me, Emma said honestly. Nathan looked at her, really looked at her, and something in his expression made her heart skip. The guest room is down the hall, he said quietly. There are clothes in the closet. My wife's. I haven't been able to. They should fit you. The bathroom has everything you need. He paused. Stay as long as you want, Emma. Please. I mean that. Emma wanted to argue. Wanted to insist she'd leave first thing in the morning. But she was so tired. So cold. And the thought of a rail bed, a hot shower, clothes that weren't falling apart. One night, she repeated. Nathan nodded. But when he looked at his sleeping daughter, and then back at Emma, she could have sworn she saw him smile. One night became two. Two became a week. Emma kept meaning to leave. Every morning, she woke up in the softest bed she'd ever slept in, looked at the designer clothes in the closet, and told herself today was the day. Today she would thank Nathan for his hospitality and walk out the door with her dignity intact. And every morning, Sophie would appear in the doorway, curly hair wild from sleep, Mr. Whiskers dangling from one hand. Emma, will you make pancakes? Daddy tries, but he burns them. Emma, will you braid my hair? Like Rapunzel. Emma, will you read me a story? You do the voices better than anyone. How was she supposed to say no to that face? Nathan, to his credit, didn't pressure her. He didn't make her feel like a charity case or a guest who'd overstayed her welcome. He went to work in the mornings, came home in the evenings, and seemed genuinely grateful every time he walked through the door to find Sophie laughing. She hasn't laughed like that since Caroline, he told Emma one night, after Sophie was in bed. They were sitting in the living room, the city lights glittering beyond the windows. I've tried everything. Therapists, toys, trips to Disneyland. Nothing worked. But you. I'm not doing anything special, Emma said. I'm just here. That's exactly what's special. Nathan's voice was soft. You're just here. Present. Patient. You don't treat her like she's broken. She's not broken. She's hurting. There's a difference. Nathan was quiet for a long moment, staring at his hands. I don't know how to help her, he admitted. I love her more than anything in the world, but I don't know how to make it better. I'm her father, and I can't fix it. I can't bring her mother back. You can't fix grief, Emma said gently. Trust me, I know. You can only walk through it, and you're walking through it with her. That's all she needs. He looked at her then, and Emma felt the weight of his gaze like a physical touch. What about you? Who's walking through it with you? The question caught her off guard. She thought about the shelter, about Rose's kindness, about the endless lonely nights when she'd cry into her pillow because her mother was gone, and there was no one left to call her sweetheart. No one, she said honestly. But I'm managing. You shouldn't have to just manage. The intensity in his voice made her breath catch. She looked away, afraid of what he might see in her eyes. I should go to bed, she said, standing abruptly. Early morning. Sophie wants to feed the ducks in the park. Emma. She stopped but didn't turn around. I know this arrangement isn't fair to you, Nathan said. You're not a nanny. You're not an employee. But Sophie needs you. And if I'm being honest, I need you too. So let me make you an offer. I told you, I don't want your money. I'm not offering money. He stood, crossing to stand in front of her. Close. Too close. She could smell his cologne, could see the flecks of silver in his steel blue eyes. I'm offering you a job. A real one. Live-in caretaker for Sophie. Room and board included, but also a salary and benefits and a chance to finish your nursing degree. You mentioned you were in school before. Emma's heart was pounding. Why would you do that? Because my daughter adores you. Because you saved her life. Because every agency I've contacted has sent me people who see Sophie as a paycheck, not a person. He took a breath. And because I see you, Emma Sinclair. I see how strong you are, how kind, how determined. You deserve a chance to get back on your feet. Let me give you that chance. She should say no. She knew she should say no. Getting involved with this man, this family, this life that wasn't hers. It was dangerous. It would only lead to heartbreak when reality came crashing back. But then she thought about Sophie's laugh. About the way the little girl reached for her hand like it was the most natural thing in the world. About the feeling of purpose she'd found in this penthouse. The first purpose she'd felt since her mother died. Okay, she whispered. I'll stay. Nathan's smile was like the sun coming out after a storm. The weeks that followed were the happiest Emma could remember. She fell into a routine with Sophie. Mornings at the park and afternoons doing crafts and evenings reading stories until the little girl fell asleep. She enrolled in night classes to finish her nursing degree, Nathan insisting on paying for everything despite her protests. Consider it part of your benefits package, he said with a grin that made her stomach flip. She tried to ignore the flip. Tried to ignore the way her heart raced when Nathan came home from work and his face lit up at the sight of her. Tried to ignore the way his hand would linger on her shoulder, her back, the small of her waist, touches that felt like more than employer and employee. But one evening, Sophie fell asleep early after a long day at the zoo, and Emma found herself alone with Nathan on the balcony, watching the sunset paint the city in shades of gold and pink. She drew you a picture today, Emma said, pulling a folded piece of paper from her pocket. She wanted me to give it to you. Nathan unfolded it carefully. It was a crayon drawing of 3 figures holding hands. A tall man, a small girl, and a woman with orange hair. Above them, Sophie had written in wobbly letters, "My family." Family, Nathan said, his voice thick. She spelled it wrong. She's 4. I know. He cleared his throat. She hasn't drawn her family since Caroline died. She refused. Said it made her too sad. He looked at Emma, and there was something in his eyes that made her forget how to breathe. You're in her family now. I'm just the nanny. You're not just anything. Nathan stepped closer. Emma, I need to tell you something. Something I probably shouldn't say because you work for me and it's inappropriate and complicated, but I can't keep pretending. Nathan, I think about you constantly. The words tumbled out of him. When I'm in meetings, I'm thinking about coming home to you. When I can't sleep, I'm wondering if you're awake too. When Sophie tells me about her day, all the best parts have you in them. He reached out, tucking a strand of auburn hair behind her ear. You changed everything, Emma. You saved my daughter, but somehow you saved me too. Emma's heart was hammering so hard she was sure he could hear it. This is a bad idea. I know. I'm homeless. I have nothing. You're a millionaire with a company and a daughter and a life that has nothing to do with someone like me. You're wrong. Nathan cupped her face in his hands. You're everything to do with my life now. You're the missing piece I didn't know I was looking for. She wanted to pull away, wanted to be smart, be sensible, be the practical person who didn't believe in fairy tales. But when he leaned in, his lips hovering just above hers, she didn't move. Tell me to stop, he whispered. She couldn't. The kiss was soft at first, tentative like a question. Then her hands found his chest, his arms wrapped around her waist, and the question became an answer. She kissed him back with everything she had, all the loneliness and longing and hope she'd tried so hard to bury. When they finally broke apart, both breathless, Nathan pressed his forehead to hers. Stay, he said. Not as a nanny, not as an employee. Stay because you want to, because this is real. Emma closed her eyes. For the first time in months, she wasn't afraid of the future. I'll stay, she said, and she meant it. The morning started like any other. Pancakes with Sophie, a goodbye kiss from Nathan that still made Emma's toes curl, and plans to visit the Children's Museum after lunch. Then the doorbell rang. Emma answered it expecting a delivery or perhaps Nathan's assistant with forgotten documents. Instead, she found a woman who looked like she'd stepped out of a fashion magazine. Tall, blonde, immaculately dressed in a white Chanel suit, with cold gray eyes that swept over Emma like she was something unpleasant on the bottom of a designer shoe. Who are you? the woman demanded. I'm Emma. Can I help you? Emma. The woman's lips curled. The homeless girl Nathan picked up like a stray dog. Yes, I've heard about you. Before Emma could respond, Sophie came running to the door. Aunt Vanessa. The woman's expression transformed into something resembling warmth as she crouched down to Sophie's level. Hello, darling. Annie's been so worried about you. I heard about your little adventure in the storm. Emma saved me, Sophie said proudly. She carried me forever and ever. Did she? Vanessa's eyes flicked to Emma, and the warmth vanished. How heroic. She swept past Emma into the penthouse like she owned it, settling onto the couch and crossing her legs with practiced elegance. I assume Nathan's at work, Vanessa said. Typical. Always prioritizing business over his daughter. Mr. Cross is a wonderful father, Emma said, her voice steady despite her racing heart. Is that what the help thinks? Vanessa smiled, but it was sharp as broken glass. Let me tell you what I think. I think my late sister would be horrified to see her daughter being raised by a millionaire too busy to notice his child wandering into traffic and a homeless woman who saw an opportunity. That's not what happened. No? Then what would you call it? You save Sophie. Nathan takes you in out of guilt, and suddenly you're living in his penthouse, wearing his dead wife's clothes, kissing him on the balcony where the whole building can see. Emma felt her face flush. Someone had seen them. Someone had told Vanessa. I understand you're concerned about Sophie, Emma said carefully. But Nathan loves his daughter. Everything he does is for her. Everything he does is for his image. Vanessa stood, smoothing her skirt. I'm filing for custody, Emma. My lawyers are drawing up the papers as we speak. Sophie belongs with family, not with a father who can't keep track of her and a gold digger playing house. You can't do that. Watch me. Vanessa's smile widened. I was going to wait until I had more evidence, but I think the story of the billionaire and the homeless girl will make quite the impression on a family court judge. Don't you? She left without another word, leaving Emma standing in the middle of the living room, her heart pounding. Sophie tugged at her hand. Emma? Why did Aunt Vanessa look so mad? She's just worried about you, sweetheart. Emma forced a smile. Why don't we go make some cookies? But as Sophie ran off to the kitchen, Emma felt the walls closing in. She told Nathan everything that night, watched his face go from confusion to anger to something that looked like fear. Vanessa's been threatening custody for months, he said, pacing the living room. Ever since Caroline died, she's been convinced I'm not fit to raise Sophie. She thinks because she's blood family, she has more right to my daughter than I do. Does she have a case? She has money and connections and a team of lawyers who specialize in making fathers look bad. Nathan ran a hand through his hair. And now she has you. Emma felt like she'd been slapped. What does that mean? It means she's going to use our relationship against me. Single father falls for homeless woman, brings her into his home, neglects his child who nearly dies in a storm. He laughed bitterly. She'll spin it into a story of negligence and poor judgment. And the worst part is, she might be right. Nathan, I let Sophie wander out that night because I was working. I let you into my life because I was lonely and grateful, and I didn't stop to think about how it would look. He turned to face her, and the pain in his eyes made her chest ache. I'm not saying I regret you. I could never regret you. But maybe we moved too fast. Maybe this was a mistake. The word hit her like a physical blow. Mistake. You think I'm a mistake? I think I put my happiness before my daughter's safety. Again. Nathan's voice broke. Emma, if Vanessa wins, if she takes Sophie away from me because I fell in love with you, then I'll leave. The words came out before Emma could stop them. I'll leave, and you can tell the court I was just a nanny. A temporary employee. Nothing romantic happened. Emma, no. I can't ask you to do that. You're not asking. I'm offering. She stood, her heart shattering even as she forced her voice to stay calm. Sophie is the most important thing. She's always been the most important thing. I knew that from the moment I picked her up in that storm. And if me being here puts her at risk, then I have to go. Where will you go? I survived before you. I'll survive again. Nathan looked at her like she was breaking his heart. Maybe she was. But she'd rather break his heart than let him lose his daughter. Give me a few days, he said finally. Let me talk to my lawyers. There has to be another way. Emma nodded, but they both knew the truth. Some things weren't meant to be. She packed her bag that night. Not to leave, not yet, but to be ready. She folded the beautiful clothes that weren't really hers, looked around the guest room that had felt like home, and tried not to cry. A soft knock made her turn. Sophie stood in the doorway, Mr. Whiskers clutched to her chest, tears streaming down her face. Emma, please don't go. Her voice was barely a whisper. Please, I'll be good. I'll be so good. I won't cause any more trouble. Just please don't leave me like Mommy did. Emma's heart shattered completely. She crossed the room and gathered the little girl into her arms, holding her tight. Oh, sweetheart, this isn't your fault. None of this is your fault. Then why do people always leave? Emma didn't have an answer. She just held Sophie and let them both cry, and prayed that somehow, someway, there was still a path to a happy ending. The next 3 days were agony. Emma stayed, because Sophie begged her to, because Nathan's lawyers said leaving now would look suspicious, because she couldn't bring herself to walk out the door. But everything had changed. Nathan threw himself into work, barely home, barely speaking. Sophie clung to Emma with desperate intensity, as if she could keep her there through sheer force of will. Vanessa's lawyers moved fast. There would be a preliminary hearing in 2 weeks. Character witnesses, home evaluations, testimonies about parental fitness. Nathan's legal team was confident, but Emma could see the fear he was trying to hide. Rosa came to visit on the 3rd day, bringing coffee and common sense. You look terrible, she said, settling onto the kitchen stool while Sophie napped. I feel terrible. Because you're running away. I'm not running away. I'm protecting them. By leaving? By proving Vanessa right that you were just a temporary arrangement. Rosa shook her head. Emma, I've known you for 6 months. You're the most stubborn person I've ever met. You walked 3 miles through a storm carrying a child. You survived homelessness with your dignity intact. But the moment things get complicated, you're ready to give up. This is different. How? Because it involves your heart. Rosa reached across the counter to take Emma's hand. Mija, sometimes the hardest thing and the right thing are the same thing. Running away isn't protecting Nathan and Sophie. It's protecting yourself from getting hurt. And you deserve better than that. What if Vanessa's right? What if I am just a gold digger who saw an opportunity? Do you believe that? No. Does Nathan believe it? No. Then why does Vanessa's opinion matter more than the truth? Rosa squeezed her hand. Fight for this, Emma. Fight for them. Not because you need them, but because you love them and they love you. That's what family does. Family. There was that word again. The word Sophie had written in crayon. The word Emma hadn't dared to hope for since her mother died. What if I fight and I lose? Then at least you'll know you tried. Rosa smiled. But something tells me you won't lose. That little girl in there needs you. Her father needs you. And whether you want to admit it or not, you need them too. Emma was still thinking about Rosa's words when Nathan came home that night. He looked exhausted, his tie loosened, dark circles under his eyes. But when he saw Emma sitting in the living room, something in his expression softened. You're still here, he said quietly. I'm still here. He crossed the room and sat beside her, close but not touching. Emma, I owe you an apology. What I said the other night, calling this a mistake. I was scared and I took it out on you, and that wasn't fair. You were right to be scared. Vanessa is a real threat. Vanessa is a bully. Nathan's jaw tightened. And I've spent my whole life not backing down from bullies. I don't know why I thought this time should be different. Because Sophie's involved. Because the stakes are higher. The stakes are always higher when you love someone. He turned to look at her, and Emma felt the full weight of his gaze. I love you, Emma. I should have said it before everything went wrong. I love you, and I don't want you to leave. I don't want to fight this battle without you. Nathan, I talked to my lawyers today. Really talked to them. And they said something that made me think. He took her hands in his. They said Vanessa's whole case is built on the narrative that I'm an unfit father who makes poor decisions. But you're not a poor decision, Emma. You're the best decision I've ever made. You saved my daughter's life. You brought joy back into our home. You loved Sophie when she needed it most. That's not how Vanessa will spin it. Then we spin it differently. Nathan's eyes were fierce. We tell the truth. All of it. How you carried Sophie through the storm with nothing to gain. How you stayed even when I offered you money and you refused. How you became part of our family not because of what you could get, but because of who you are. And if the judge doesn't believe it, then we fight harder. We appeal. We do whatever it takes. He brought her hands to his lips, pressing a kiss to her knuckles. But I'm done running scared. I'm done letting Vanessa dictate how I live my life and raise my daughter. Sophie loves you. I love you. That has to count for something. Emma felt tears prickling at her eyes. I'm scared, Nathan. So am I. He smiled, and it was like watching the sun break through clouds. But I'm more scared of losing you than I am of anything Vanessa can do. So what do you say? Will you fight with me? She thought about Rose's words, about Sophie's crayon family, about the feeling of Nathan's arms around her and the home she'd found in the most unexpected place. Yes, she whispered. I'll fight with you. Nathan pulled her into his arms, holding her like he'd never let go. And for the first time in days, Emma felt hope bloom in her chest. They had a battle ahead, but they would face it together. The courtroom was smaller than Emma expected, more intimate, which made it worse. Somehow, knowing that Sophie's future would be decided in a room that could fit in Nathan's living room. Vanessa sat across the aisle, flanked by lawyers in expensive suits, looking like she'd already won. She caught Emma's eye and smiled, slow and cold. Emma looked away. All rise. The judge was a woman in her 60s with silver hair and sharp eyes. Judge Patricia Morrison. She looked at both parties with an expression that gave nothing away. This is a preliminary hearing in the matter of custody for Sophie Caroline Cross. The judge began. I've reviewed the filings from both parties. Miss Thornton, you're claiming that Mr. Cross is an unfit parent and that Sophie would be better served in your care. Mr. Cross, you're contesting this claim. Is that correct? Both parties confirmed. Then let's hear the arguments. Vanessa's lawyer went first, painting a picture that made Emma's blood boil. Nathan as the absent workaholic. Sophie as the neglected child who'd nearly died because her father couldn't be bothered to watch her. Emma as the opportunistic stranger who'd inserted herself into a vulnerable family for her own gain. Ms. Sinclair has no employment history for the past year, the lawyer said. No fixed address. No family. By her own admission, she was living on the streets when she encountered Sophie. And now she's living in Mr. Cross's penthouse, wearing his late wife's clothes, sleeping in his bed. One has to wonder what exactly Mr. Cross is thinking, exposing his daughter to someone so clearly unsuitable. Emma felt Nathan's hand find hers under the table. She held on tight. Then it was Nathan's lawyer's turn. Your Honor, my client would like to present a different narrative, one supported by facts, not conjecture. The lawyer stood, commanding the room. Emma Sinclair was indeed homeless when she found Sophie Cross alone in a storm. But let's examine what she did in that moment. She didn't look for a reward. She didn't call for help and walk away. She gave the child her only jacket, picked her up, and walked 3 miles through dangerous conditions to get her to safety. The lawyer pulled out documents. We have testimony from the shelter workers who witnessed Ms. Sinclair's condition when she arrived. Hypothermic, exhausted, barely able to stand. But she refused medical attention until Sophie was cared for first. Judge Morrison's expression flickered. Ms. Sinclair was offered money by Mr. Cross, the lawyer continued. She refused. She was offered a hotel room. She refused that too. She only agreed to stay when Sophie, a traumatized 4-year-old, begged her not to leave. The lawyer turned to face Vanessa. Miss Thornton claims Emma Sinclair is an opportunist. But opportunists don't refuse thousands of dollars. They don't walk through storms carrying other people's children. They don't give up their only jacket when they have nothing else. He turned back to the judge. Your Honor, we'd like to call Emma Sinclair to the stand. Emma's heart stopped. Nathan's lawyer had warned her this might happen, had prepared her for questions. But nothing could have prepared her for the reality of walking to that witness chair with everyone watching. She was sworn in. She sat down. And then Vanessa's lawyer descended. Ms. Sinclair, let's be honest. You saw a little girl from a wealthy family and you saw an opportunity. Isn't that true? No. No? Then why did you bring Sophie to a shelter instead of calling the police immediately? Because she was freezing and scared. The nearest police station was further than the shelter. I made a judgment call to get her warm first. A judgment call. The lawyer smiled. And your judgment told you to stay in the Cross penthouse indefinitely? I stayed because Sophie asked me to. Because she was traumatized and she felt safe with me. How convenient. It wasn't convenient. Emma's voice was steady despite her pounding heart. I didn't want to stay. I knew how it would look. But have you ever held a 4-year-old who's crying because she thinks everyone she loves is going to leave her? Have you ever looked into her eyes and seen that kind of fear? She paused. I couldn't walk away from that. I wouldn't. The lawyer faltered, just for a moment. Emma pressed on. I know what you think of me. I know what the world sees when they look at someone homeless. They see failure, weakness, someone who doesn't matter. She looked at Vanessa. But I was homeless because I gave up everything to take care of my dying mother. I was homeless because medical bills and funeral costs took every penny I had. I was homeless because sometimes life isn't fair. Not because I'm broken or opportunistic or whatever else you want to call me. She turned to the judge. I love Sophie. I love her father. And I would give up everything I have to keep them safe. But the thing is, I already did that once. When I picked Sophie up in that storm, I had nothing left to give except myself. And I gave it. Gladly. Because that's what love looks like. Not money. Not status. Just showing up when someone needs you. The courtroom was silent. Judge Morrison leaned forward. Ms. Sinclair, do you believe you belong in this family? Emma thought about the question. Thought about all the reasons she didn't. The money, the status, the world she didn't understand. Then she thought about Sophie's crayon drawing. About Nathan's arms around her. About the feeling of home she'd found in the most unexpected place. I don't know if I belong, she said honestly. But I know that I love them. And I know that Sophie is happy and safe and thriving. And I know that Nathan is a good father who would do anything for his daughter. Whatever you decide today, please don't take Sophie away from him. She's already lost her mother. Please don't make her lose her father too. She stepped down from the stand. As she walked back to her seat, she saw Sophie in the back of the courtroom with Nathan's assistant. The little girl was holding Mr. Whiskers, watching Emma with those big, trusting eyes. Emma smiled at her. Whatever happened next, she'd told the truth. That had to be enough. The judge called a 30-minute recess. Nathan found Emma in the hallway, pulling her into a tight embrace. You were incredible, he murmured against her hair. Absolutely incredible. I just told the truth. The truth is incredible when it comes from you. They stood there for a moment, drawing strength from each other, until a familiar voice interrupted. Well, that was quite the performance. Vanessa stood a few feet away, her arms crossed, her expression unreadable. Nathan stiffened, but Emma put a hand on his arm. Let me, she said quietly. She approached Vanessa, heart pounding but determination steady. I know you hate me, Emma said. And maybe you have reason to. I came from nowhere. I have nothing. I don't fit into your world or your sister's world or any world you understand. You're right. You don't. But here's the thing. Emma took a breath. I don't care about fitting in. I don't care about Nathan's money or his status or his penthouse. I care about Sophie. I care about making her laugh and drying her tears and helping her through the nightmare of losing her mother. You think you can replace Caroline? No. Emma's voice was soft. No one can replace Caroline. She was Sophie's mother, and Sophie will always love her. But I can be something else. I can be someone who shows up, someone who stays, someone who loves that little girl for who she is, not what she represents. Vanessa's jaw tightened. And what about Nathan? Do you love him? Or do you love what he can give you? He could lose everything tomorrow and I'd still be there. Emma met her gaze steadily. I've been through losing everything. I know what matters. And it's not money. It's the people who hold your hand when the world falls apart. For a long moment, Vanessa said nothing. Then, slowly, something shifted in her expression. Not warmth, not acceptance, but something like recognition. My sister would have liked you, she said finally. Caroline always was attracted to strays. Is that supposed to be an insult? I don't know anymore. Vanessa uncrossed her arms. I came here to protect Sophie. I genuinely believe I was doing the right thing. But watching you in there, hearing you talk about her, she shook her head. You love that child. More than anything. Then promise me something. Vanessa stepped closer. Promise me that if you stay, you'll really stay. No disappearing when things get hard. No walking away when someone better comes along. Sophie's lost too much already. She can't lose anyone else. I promise. Vanessa searched her face for a long moment. Then she turned and walked back toward the courtroom, leaving Emma standing in the hallway with her heart in her throat. The recess ended. Everyone filed back in. Judge Morrison took her seat and shuffled through papers, her expression giving nothing away. I've heard compelling arguments from both sides, she began, and I've given this matter considerable thought. Emma reached for Nathan's hand. He held on like she was his lifeline. Custody cases are never simple, the judge continued. We're dealing with a child's future, with family dynamics, with questions that don't have easy answers. Miss Thornton's concerns about her niece's welfare are not without merit. The incident that brought Sophie and Ms. Sinclair together was, by any measure, a failure of supervision. Nathan's grip tightened. Emma could barely breathe. However, the judge looked up. The court's primary concern is the best interest of the child. And after reviewing the evidence, hearing the testimonies, and observing the parties involved, I find no indication that Mr. Cross is an unfit parent. Quite the contrary. I see a father who loves his daughter deeply and has taken steps to ensure her well-being, including bringing a positive influence into her life. She turned to Emma. Ms. Sinclair, your testimony was refreshing. I've sat in this courtroom for 23 years, and I've heard every kind of story. I can usually spot a liar. You are not a liar. You are, by all accounts, exactly what you appear to be. A young woman who did an extraordinary thing and found herself in an extraordinary situation. The judge straightened her papers. I'm denying Ms. Thornton's petition for custody. Sophie will remain with her father. However, I'm recommending continued family therapy and regular check-ins with child services for the next 6 months, just to ensure stability during this transition period. Relief crashed over Emma like a wave. Nathan pulled her into his arms, not caring who saw, not caring about anything except the fact that they'd won. Thank you, he whispered. Thank you, thank you, thank you. In the gallery, Sophie broke free from the assistant and ran toward them, crashing into their embrace with Mr. Whiskers still clutched in her hand. Does this mean Emma gets to stay? She asked, looking between them. Yeah, baby girl. Nathan's voice was thick with tears. Emma gets to stay. Sophie looked at Emma with those big green eyes, a smile spreading across her face like sunshine after rain. Forever. Emma thought about the word, about what it meant, what it promised, what it would require. Forever, she said, and she meant it. 1 year later, Emma stood on the rooftop of the Cross Hotel's flagship property, looking out at the Chicago skyline. The sun was setting, painting the city in shades of gold and pink, and somewhere behind her, she could hear Sophie's delighted laughter. Emma, Emma, look, I caught the flower girl basket. Emma turned, smiling at the 5-year-old who was now racing toward her in a poofy white dress, a basket of rose petals clutched triumphantly in her hands. You did so good, sweetheart. The best flower girl ever. Daddy says after cake we get to have a dance. All 3 of us. Like a real family. We are a real family, Emma said, crouching to be at eye level with Sophie. The realest. Sophie beamed. Then her eyes went wide, looking at something over Emma's shoulder. Daddy! Daddy's coming! Emma stood and turned. Nathan was walking toward her across the rooftop, handsome beyond words in his tuxedo, his eyes never leaving her face. Mrs. Cross, he said, reaching for her hands. I've been looking everywhere for you. Just needed a moment. She squeezed his fingers, taking it all in. And what are you taking in? Everything. Emma looked at the skyline, at the guests mingling below, at the little girl now twirling in circles with her flower basket. A year ago I had nothing, and now I have this, all of this. It doesn't feel real sometimes. It's real. Nathan pulled her close, wrapping his arms around her from behind. You're my wife, Sophie's mother in every way that matters. And I get to spend the rest of my life making sure you never forget how loved you are. Emma leaned back against his chest, feeling his heartbeat against her spine. I finished my nursing degree last month. Did I tell you? You mentioned it once or twice, maybe 100 times. She could hear the smile in his voice. I'm so proud of you. I start at the Children's Hospital next week. Pediatric wing. I want to work with kids who are going through hard things. Help them the way I couldn't help myself. You're going to be amazing. I'm going to try. She turned in his arms, looking up at him. Thank you, Nathan, for believing in me when I couldn't believe in myself. For giving me a chance when anyone else would have turned away. I should be thanking you. He cupped her face in his hands. You saved my daughter's life. You saved mine too. I was drowning in grief and work and loneliness. And you pulled me out. Just like you pulled Sophie out of that storm. I guess we saved each other. I guess we did. He kissed her then, soft and sweet and full of promise. The guests below cheered. Sophie made gagging noises. And somewhere in the distance, fireworks began to explode over Lake Michigan. Fireworks! Sophie shrieked. Emma! Daddy, look! They broke apart, laughing, and lifted Sophie between them so she could see. The little girl squealed with delight as colors burst across the darkening sky. Red and gold and silver and blue. Make a wish, Sophie commanded. You have to make a wish on fireworks. Mommy told me that. Emma looked at her husband, at her daughter, at the life she'd built from the ashes of everything she'd lost. I don't need to make a wish, she said softly. I have everything I could ever want. Nathan smiled, that smile that still made her heart skip after all these months. So do I. They stood there together, the three of them watching the fireworks paint the sky. A millionaire, a former homeless girl, and a little girl who'd brought them together. An unlikely family, forged in a storm, strengthened by love. Rosa's voice echoed in Emma's memory. Sometimes the hardest thing and the right thing are the same thing. She'd been right. Fighting had been hard. Believing had been hard. Trusting that she deserved happiness had been the hardest thing of all. But standing here now, with Nathan's arm around her waist and Sophie's hand in hers, Emma knew it had all been worth it. Because sometimes, when you have nothing, you're finally free to receive everything. And sometimes, the family you find is even better than the one you lost. Sophie tugged at her hand. Emma? Yes, sweetheart. I'm glad Mommy sent you to save me. The little girl's eyes were serious. She picked good. Emma felt tears prick her eyes. She knelt down, pulling Sophie into a tight hug. She did pick good, she whispered. She picked the best. Above them, the fireworks continued to burst, painting the night with light and color and promise. And below, in the warmth of each other's arms, a family watched them together. No longer 3 broken pieces. Finally whole. The end.